Walking up 3 flights of stairs to my Chicago apartment after another grueling 12-hour shift at the marketing firm, I expected nothing more than Rusty's enthusiastic greeting and maybe leftover pizza. Instead, I found my parents and 7-year-old niece Emma sitting stiffly on my couch with packed suitcases beside them. Dad's face wore that expression I remembered from childhood punishments. Mom avoided eye contact entirely. Emma clutched a tissue, sniffling dramatically. Then came the words that shattered my world. "We're giving your dog away. Your niece is allergic." I stared at them in disbelief, my keys still hanging from my trembling fingers as my father delivered this devastating news with the casual tone someone might use to discuss weekend plans. The next morning brought a reality I never anticipated. After sleeping in Jake's cramped studio apartment with Rusty curled against my legs on an air mattress, I felt hollow inside. My best friend since college had immediately offered his place when I called him at midnight voice-breaking as I explained what happened. Jake helped me load my belongings into his pickup truck, making multiple trips between his apartment and mine to retrieve my furniture and personal items. During our final trip, Jake needed to use the bathroom in my old apartment. My parents had given me permission to collect my remaining possessions, though the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. While Jake was inside, I waited by the truck with Rusty scratching behind his ears and trying to process how my family had turned against us so completely. That's when I heard it through the thin walls of the building. Emma's voice clear as day floating down from my former living room window above. "Mommy, when do I get to stop pretending my nose is stuffy? This is hard work and I want to play with my tablet now." My sister Sarah's response made my blood run cold. "Just a little longer, sweetheart. We need Uncle Conway to believe you're really sick from the doggy. Remember what we practiced. Keep rubbing your eyes and coughing when adults are around." I stood there frozen, my hand still buried in Rusty's golden fur as the pieces clicked into place. Emma wasn't allergic at all. This entire situation was an elaborate setup, a performance designed to manipulate me into giving up my beloved companion. My 7-year-old niece had been coached to lie to fake symptoms to help the adults in her life deceive me. When Jake emerged from the building, he found me sitting on the truck's tailgate, staring into space. "Conway, man, you look like you've seen a ghost. Shh, what happened?" I told him what I'd overheard, watching his expression shift from confusion to anger. Jake had been there when I first brought Rusty home as a puppy during our sophomore year at Northwestern. He'd seen me train him, comfort him through thunderstorms, celebrate his birthday every year with a special dog-friendly cake from the pet bakery downtown. "So this whole thing is fake?" Jake asked, running his hands through his dark hair. "Your family orchestrated this elaborate scheme just to get rid of your dog?" I nodded slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form in my mind. "But why? What do they gain from forcing me out? It doesn't make sense unless—" I trailed off, remembering recent conversations with my sister about her financial struggles after her messy divorce 6 months ago. Jake leaned against the truck, crossing his arms. "Unless they want your apartment for themselves. Think about it, Conway. You're paying $3,600 a month in rent. That's not exactly pocket change. If they could get you out and move Sarah and Emma in, they'd have a nice place to live without the expense." The realization hit me like a physical blow. My family hadn't just betrayed my trust. They'd used an innocent child as a weapon against me. They'd turned my niece into an unwilling accomplice in their deception, teaching her that lying and manipulation were acceptable tools to get what you wanted. As we drove away from what had been my home for 3 years, Rusty's head resting on my shoulder from the back seat, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and painful, but underneath it grew something else. Determination. If my family wanted to play games, they were about to learn that I could play them better. 3 weeks after moving in with Jake, I received the phone call I'd been expecting. My mother's voice trembled through the speaker as I sat in the small coffee shop near Jake's apartment. Rusty lying peacefully at my feet under the outdoor table. "Conway, honey, we need to talk. Can you come over?" It's about the rent situation. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. What about the rent situation, Mom? Well, we're having some trouble making the full payment without your contribution. We thought maybe we could work something out, temporarily until we get back on our feet. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. I'd calculated this scenario weeks ago. Without my $3,600 monthly contribution, my parents would be responsible for $5,400 in rent alone. Add utilities insurance and other expenses, and they were looking at nearly $6,000 per month. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied calmly, watching a young couple walk their small terrier past our table. Have you considered downsizing to something more affordable? Conway, please, don't be like this. We're family. Emma really is sensitive to pet dander. The doctor confirmed it after you left. We were just trying to protect her health. The lies kept coming, each one more transparent than the last. I'd done my research in the past few weeks, calling Emma's pediatrician directly. After explaining the situation, Dr. Martinez had been quite clear. Emma had never been tested. For pet allergies, had never shown any symptoms and had actually played with Rusty during previous visits to the clinic without any issues whatsoever. Mom, I spoke with Dr. Martinez yesterday. Emma has never been diagnosed with any allergies. Would you like to explain why you're still lying to me? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, my father's voice came through the speaker. He must have taken the phone from my mother. Son, you're being unreasonable. This is bigger than just you and that dog. Sarah is going through a difficult time with the divorce, and Emma needs stability. We're trying to hold this family together. By lying to me, by manipulating a 7-year-old child, by forcing me to choose between my family and my companion of 11 years, life requires sacrifices, Conway. Sometimes you have to think about what's best for everyone, not just yourself. I stood up, prompting Rusty to raise his head and look at me with those trusting brown eyes that had comforted me through college stress, career challenges, and relationship troubles. This dog had been my constant companion through every major life event of the past decade. Here's what's best for everyone, Dad. You figure out how to pay your own rent. I'm not contributing another dollar to an apartment where my dog isn't welcome. After hanging up, I walked Rusty through Lincoln Park, processing the conversation. My phone buzzed with increasingly frantic text messages throughout the afternoon. First, from my mother pleading for understanding. Then from Sarah, alternating between guilt trips and angry accusations. Finally, from my father demanding I stop being selfish and help the family. That evening, Jake and I were preparing dinner in his tiny kitchen when my phone rang again. This time it was Marcus, my parents' landlord. I'd known Marcus casually for years. He owned several properties in our neighborhood and had always been fair and professional. Conway, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. Your father gave me your number. We need to discuss the rent situation for next month. What exactly did my father tell you, Marcus? He said there was a temporary family situation affecting the payment and that you might be able to help bridge the gap. But I've been doing some research into the account history and I'm discovering some concerning irregularities. My stomach dropped. What kind of irregularities? Well, it appears that for the past 8 months, the rent payments have been coming from multiple sources. Usually there's one primary payment of $3,600 from an account in your name, then additional smaller payments from your parents' account to make up the difference. But I'm also seeing several overdraft fees and returned payment notices from your parents' bank. I sat down heavily at Jake's small dining table. Are you saying they've been struggling to pay their portion for 8 months? That's exactly what I'm saying. And there's something else, Conway. I received a call from your father yesterday asking about the possibility of adding additional occupants to the lease. He mentioned your sister and her daughter might be moving in permanently. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. This wasn't a sudden decision motivated by Emma's fake allergies. This was a carefully planned scheme that had been in motion for months. My parents had been gradually falling behind on their financial obligations, relying more and more heavily on my contributions, while secretly planning to move Sarah and Emma into the apartment. The dog situation was just the excuse they needed to push me out and make room for their real plan. They'd used my love for Rusty against me, knowing I'd choose him over fighting with them, knowing I'd quietly leave rather than subject him to a hostile environment. Marcus, I need to ask you something important. Are my parents behind on any other payments, utilities, building fees, anything else? Actually, yes. They owe approximately $2,800 in late fees and missed payments over the past 6 months. I've been patient because of your reliable contributions, but without those, I can't continue to overlook the arrears. After hanging up with Marcus, I stared at my phone, feeling a mixture of betrayal and cold calculation. My family hadn't just lied to me. They'd been lying to everyone. They'd used my financial stability as a safety net while making irresponsible decisions, then manipulated an elaborate crisis to solve their problems at my expense. Jake emerged from the bathroom, took one look at my face, and sat down across from me. What now? They've been planning this for months, Jake. The whole thing. They're not just short my portion of the rent. They're behind on everything. They owe thousands in late fees and missed payments. So what are you going to do? I looked over at Rusty, who had settled onto his favorite blanket in the corner of Jake's living room. He'd adapted to our temporary situation with the resilience and trust that had always amazed me about dogs. He didn't understand the betrayal or the manipulation. He just knew that as long as we were together, everything would be okay. I'm going to let them face the consequences of their choices, I said finally, and I'm going to make sure they understand exactly what those consequences cost them. The next morning brought revelations that shattered what little remained of my trust in my family. I was walking Rusty along the lakefront path when my mother called, her voice thick with tears and panic. Conway, please, you have to help us. The eviction notice came today. We have 30 days to pay everything we owe or we're out on the street. Please, honey, I'm begging you. Mom, slow down. Tell me exactly what you owe. $8,400 total. That includes back rent, late fees, and next month's payment. Conway, we don't have that kind of money. Your father. Her voice broke completely. My father, what, Mom? He's been gambling again. The casino downtown. He told me he could win back what we'd lost, make up for the shortfall in our retirement fund. Instead, he's been using the rent money, thinking he could replace it before anyone noticed. I stopped walking. Rusty pausing beside me to investigate an interesting scent near a park bench. My father's gambling addiction had destroyed our family's finances once before when I was in high school. I'd thought those days were behind us. How long has this been going on? 8 months, maybe longer. I don't know Conway. He hides the statements from me, says he's handling everything. I only found out yesterday when the bank called about overdraft fees. The timeline aligned perfectly with Marcus's account records. My father had been systematically gambling away their portion of the rent money, relying on my contributions to cover the shortfall while desperately trying to win back what he'd lost. Mom, where's Sarah in all this? I assume she knows what's happening. Oh, Conway, there's something else. Something I should have told you weeks ago. My mother's voice took on a quality I'd never heard before, a mixture of shame and fear that made my stomach clench. Sarah has been meeting with Lisa, your ex-girlfriend Lisa. They've been talking for months about ways to get you back together. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Lisa and I had broken up 8 months ago after she'd given me an ultimatum: choose between her and Rusty. She'd claimed my attachment to my dog was unhealthy, that it prevented me from fully committing to our relationship. I'd chosen Rusty without hesitation, and Lisa had moved to Denver shortly afterward for a new job. What do you mean, meeting with Lisa? She never moved to Denver, Conway. She's been staying with a friend in Lincoln Park this whole time, waiting for the right opportunity. Sarah reached out to her about your situation, and Lisa convinced her that getting rid of the dog would make you more available for a serious relationship. The manipulation was so elaborate, so deeply planned, that I couldn't process it all at once. My sister hadn't just conspired with my parents to steal my apartment. She'd been working with my ex-girlfriend to orchestrate the removal of my dog as part of some twisted reconciliation scheme. Lisa told Sarah that you'd be grateful once you realized how much easier your life would be without the responsibility of a pet. My mother continued. She promised Sarah that you'd want to help family financially once you were thinking more clearly. I sank onto the park bench, Rusty immediately moving to sit beside me, his warm presence grounding me in the moment. The betrayal was so complete, so multifaceted that I almost admired its complexity. My family hadn't just lied to me. They'd recruited my ex-girlfriend as a co-conspirator, used my niece as an unwitting actor, and built an entire false narrative around my dog's supposed threat to a child's health. Mom, is Emma even staying at the apartment? Or was that part of the lie too? She's been staying with us since the divorce became final. Sarah lost the house, couldn't afford her own place. We thought if we could get you to move out temporarily, just until Sarah got back on her feet financially, everything would work out for everyone. Except for me and Rusty. Conway Lisa assured us that you'd be happier without the dog. She said it would be better for your mental health that you were using Rusty to avoid real human relationships. I looked down at my golden retriever whose patient brown eyes reflected nothing but love and loyalty. This dog had seen me through my parents' first financial crisis, helped me survive the stress of college, provided comfort during every difficult moment of my adult life. The idea that he was somehow preventing me from forming human connections was so absurd, it would have been laughable if it wasn't so insulting. Mom, I need you to understand something very clearly. Lisa and I broke up because she tried to make me choose between her and my dog. I chose my dog then, and I'd make the same choice again today. Any woman who can't accept Rusty as part of my life isn't someone I want to be with. But Conway Lisa said she'd changed her mind about the dog. She said she realized she was wrong to ask you to choose and that she wanted to try again. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Lisa hadn't moved to Denver. She'd been in Chicago this entire time, waiting and planning. She'd identified my family's financial vulnerabilities and exploited them, convincing my parents and sister that removing Rusty from my life would somehow benefit everyone involved. Mom, I want you to give Lisa a message from me. Tell her that if she comes anywhere near me or my dog, I'll file a restraining order. And tell Sarah that if she ever uses Emma to lie to me again, she'll lose access to her daughter permanently. After hanging up, I sat in the park for another hour processing everything I'd learned. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Conway, it's Lisa. I know you're angry, but we need to talk. I can explain everything. Meet me at our old coffee shop tonight at 7. Come alone. I stared at the message, feeling a cold rage build in my chest. Lisa's audacity was breathtaking. After orchestrating this elaborate scheme to destroy my relationship with my family and force me to give up my dog, she actually expected me to meet with her for some kind of reconciliation conversation. I typed back a simple response, I have nothing to say to you. Stay away from me and my family. Her reply came immediately. You don't understand the whole situation, Conway. Your family's problems are bigger than you realize. I was trying to help everyone, including you. I blocked her number and stood up from the bench, Rusty rising expectantly beside me. We had planning to do, and I was beginning to formulate a response that would address every level of this betrayal. My family wanted to play elaborate games with lies and manipulation. I was about to show them what a real strategic response looked like. The law offices of Sullivan Martinez and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Chicago high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan. I'd chosen this firm specifically because they specialized in real estate law and had an excellent reputation for handling complex family financial disputes. Attorney Patricia Sullivan was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd built her career on helping people navigate exactly the kind of situation I was facing. After reviewing the documents I'd brought, including lease agreements, bank statements, and recorded conversations, she leaned back in her leather chair with a thoughtful expression. Conway, this is quite a complex situation you've brought me. Let me make sure I understand the full scope of what's happened here. I'd spent 3 days documenting everything, the fake allergy story, the financial irregularities Marcus had discovered, my father's gambling debts, Lisa's involvement in the conspiracy, and Sarah's plans to move into my apartment. I'd even managed to record a conversation with Emma during which my niece had innocently revealed more details about the pretend game the adults had taught her to play. Your family has essentially committed fraud in multiple forms, Patricia continued. They've lied to you, to their landlord, and they've involved a minor child in their deception. They've also been using your financial contributions under false pretenses while planning to evict you from your own home. That's exactly right. But here's what I want to know. Do I have any legal recourse? Can I protect myself from future manipulation while also ensuring Emma doesn't suffer because of her mother's poor choices? Patricia opened the file folder and spread the documents across her desk. Let's start with the immediate issues. First, you're clearly entitled to remove yourself from the lease and stop contributing financially. Second, if your father has been using rent money for gambling, that's a serious breach of the lease agreement that could result in immediate eviction. She pulled out a document I hadn't seen before. But here's something interesting, Conway. I did some research into the building where you've been living. The property is currently for sale, and under Illinois real estate law, tenants in good financial standing have first rights of refusal to purchase their units. My pulse quickened. What does that mean exactly? It means that as the primary financial contributor to the apartment's rent payments, with a documented history of reliable payments, you have the legal right to purchase your specific unit before it goes to market. And given the current real estate climate, the price would likely be quite reasonable. I stared at her, the implications sinking in. Are you saying I could buy the apartment? Not just could, Conway. According to these financial records, you should be able to qualify for a mortgage quite easily. Your income is solid, your credit history is excellent, and you've effectively been paying the equivalent of a mortgage payment for 3 years already. She pulled out a calculator and began running numbers. Based on current market values and the building's asking price, I estimate your unit would cost approximately $280,000. With a standard 20% down payment and your current income, your monthly mortgage payment would be around $1,800. That's less than half what you've been contributing to rent. The irony was delicious. My family's scheme to push me out of the apartment could actually result in me owning it outright while they faced eviction for non-payment. Patricia, if I were to purchase the apartment, what would happen to my parents' lease? Well, as the new owner, you'd have the right to decide whether to honor existing lease agreements or start fresh. Given that they're currently in violation of their lease terms due to non-payment and fraudulent activity, you'd be within your rights to terminate their tenancy. I leaned forward, a plan crystallizing in my mind. How quickly could this process move? If you're serious about pursuing this, I could have preliminary paperwork filed within a week. The purchase process typically takes 30 to 45 days, but given the circumstances and the building owner's desire for a quick sale, we might be able to expedite things. Let's do it. Patricia smiled. Conway, there's one more thing you should know. I've been practicing real estate law for 25 years, and I've never seen a situation quite like this one. Your family's elaborate deception may have actually created the perfect opportunity for you to achieve complete financial independence from them. Over the next hour, we outlined a comprehensive strategy. I would purchase the apartment, becoming my parents' landlord. They would have to deal directly with me regarding their lease violations and outstanding debts. Sarah would need to find alternative housing for herself and Emma, and Lisa would discover that her manipulation had backfired spectacularly. There's one more element I want to discuss, Patricia said as we concluded our meeting. Your niece, Emma. From what you've told me, she's an innocent victim in this situation. How do you want to handle her involvement? I thought about Emma, remembering how confused and uncomfortable she'd looked during the fake allergy performance. I want to make sure she understands that lying is wrong, but I don't want her to suffer for her mother's mistakes. She's still my niece, and I love her. That's wise, Conway. Children who are used as pawns in adult schemes often carry guilt and confusion long after the situation resolves. You might consider arranging for some counseling for Emma to help her process what's happened and learn healthier communication patterns. As I left the law office that afternoon, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in weeks. My family had underestimated me, treating me as a convenient source of financial support. who would quietly absorb whatever treatment they decided to dish out. They'd forgotten that the same qualities that made me a reliable contributor, careful planning, financial responsibility, and strategic thinking, also made me a formidable opponent when pushed too far. I drove to Jake's apartment with Rusty sitting calmly in the passenger seat, his golden fur catching the afternoon sunlight through the car windows. My faithful companion had no idea that his persecution had accidentally triggered a chain of events that would ultimately secure our future together. "What do you think, buddy?" I asked, reaching over to scratch behind his ears, ready to go home and stay home permanently. Rusty's tail thumped against the seat in response, and I couldn't help but smile. My family wanted to play games with my life and my happiness. They were about to discover that I'd learned those games better than they'd ever imagined. 3 weeks later, I stood in my newly purchased apartment with a set of keys that would change everything. The closing had proceeded smoothly, with Patricia's firm handling every detail. The building owner had been delighted to sell quickly to a qualified buyer, and my mortgage payments were indeed nearly $2,000 less than what I'd been contributing to rent. The first order of business was installing new locks. I wanted to ensure that my parents couldn't access the apartment without permission. The second order of business was documenting the current state of the property, including several damages they'd caused over recent months that hadn't been reported to the previous landlord. I'd timed the reveal carefully. My parents were expecting their eviction notice from Marcus, but they had no idea he'd sold the building. They certainly didn't know their son was now their landlord. The knock on the door came at exactly 10 o'clock Saturday morning. Through the peephole, I could see my father standing in the hallway with Sarah and Emma beside him. My mother was notably absent, likely too ashamed to face me directly. I opened the door with Rusty at my side, his tail wagging as he spotted Emma. Despite everything that had happened, my dog held no grudges against the 7-year-old who'd been manipulated into lying about him. Conway. My father's voice carried confusion and hope. "We got a notice that the building had been sold and the new owner wanted to meet with all tenants. Do you know anything about that?" "Actually, Dad, I know everything about that." I stepped aside to let them into the apartment they'd schemed to steal from me. "Please come in. We have quite a lot to discuss." Sarah looked around the space with obvious longing. I could see her mentally arranging her furniture, planning Emma's bedroom, envisioning the life she'd hoped to build here. The irony was perfect. Emma immediately dropped to her knees to pet Rusty, her face lighting up with genuine joy. "Uncle Conway? I missed Rusty so much. Is he feeling better? Mommy said he was sick." I knelt down beside my niece, choosing my words carefully. "Emma, Rusty was never sick, sweetheart. He's been perfectly healthy this whole time. Some adults told you things that weren't true, and that wasn't your fault." My father interrupted before Emma could respond. "Conway, we don't have time for this. We need to discuss the new ownership situation. Our lease is still valid and we have rights as tenants." "You're absolutely right, Dad. You do have rights as tenants. However, you also have responsibilities which you've been failing to meet for months." I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up a folder I'd prepared for this moment. "Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Conway Mitchell and I'm your new landlord." The silence that followed was so complete. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally horror as the implications sank in. "That's impossible," my father said finally. "You don't have that kind of money." "Actually, I do. Turns out that when you've been making $3,600 monthly payments for 3 years while maintaining excellent credit and saving responsibly, banks are quite willing to approve mortgages, especially when the previous owner was motivated to sell quickly due to problematic tenants." I opened the folder and began laying documents on the coffee table. "Here's the deed to the property. Here's the mortgage paperwork, and here's the accounting of what you currently owe in back rent, late fees, and damages." Sarah sank onto the couch, her face pale. "Conway, you can't be serious about this. We're family." "You're absolutely right, Sarah. We are family. That's what makes your betrayal so particularly painful." I sat down across from them, Rusty settling beside my chair. But we're going to move forward as family members who treat each other with honesty and respect. I pulled out another document. This is your official notice of lease violation. You're currently $8,400 behind on rent and fees. Additionally, you violated the terms of your lease by subletting space without permission, planning to exceed occupancy limits, and involving a minor in fraudulent activities. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't evict your own parents. I can't evict tenants who fulfill their obligations and treat me with respect. However, I absolutely can evict tenants who lie to me, manipulate my family members, and try to steal my home. I kept my voice calm and professional. The question is whether you want to work together to solve this problem or whether you want to continue down the path you've chosen. Emma had been listening to this conversation with growing confusion. Uncle Conway, are you mad at Mommy and Grandpa? I looked at my niece, whose innocence had been exploited by every adult in her life except me. Emma, I'm sad that some adults made choices that hurt people. But I'm not mad at you, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. Sarah finally found her voice. What do you want from us, Conway? What's going to make this right? I want honesty, Sarah. I want accountability. And I want a commitment to change the patterns that created this situation. I pulled out the final document in my folder. Here's what I'm prepared to offer. The proposal I'd developed with Patricia's help was comprehensive and fair. My parents would have 60 days to pay their outstanding debts. They would attend mandatory financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment. Sarah would find alternative housing and employment within 90 days. Emma would receive counseling to help her process the lies she'd been told and learn healthy communication skills. In exchange, I continued, I'll allow you to remain in the apartment for 3 additional months at a reduced rent while you stabilize your situations. I'll also pay for family counseling sessions for all of us because I believe we can repair our relationships if everyone is willing to do the work. My father stared at the documents, his hands shaking slightly. And if we don't agree to these terms? Then you'll receive a formal eviction notice on Monday morning and you'll have 30 days to vacate the premises. Your debts will be turned over to a collection agency, and I'll pursue legal action for the fraud and manipulation you've committed. Sarah began crying quietly, the weight of her choices finally hitting her fully. Conway, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I was desperate, and Lisa convinced me that you'd be better off without the responsibility of Rusty. She said you'd thank us eventually. Sarah, I need you to understand something very clearly. My relationship with Rusty isn't a burden or a responsibility that prevents me from living my life. He's my family, just like Emma is my family. The difference is that Rusty has never lied to me, manipulated me, or tried to use me for his own benefit. I reached down to pet my golden retriever who had remained calm and peaceful throughout this entire confrontation. Any woman who would ask me to choose between her and my dog isn't someone I want in my life. And any family member who would use a child to manipulate me into giving up something I love doesn't understand what family actually means. Emma suddenly spoke up, her young voice cutting through the adult tension. I have something to show Uncle Conway. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out an iPad, her fingers moving confidently across the screen. I recorded Mommy talking on the phone about the pretend game. I thought it might be important. The room fell silent as Emma handed me the tablet. On the screen was a video file labeled with last week's date. I pressed play and immediately heard Sarah's voice crystal clear. Lisa, he's starting to ask questions about Emma's symptoms. Are you sure this plan is going to work? What if he finds out we're lying? Lisa's voice came through the speaker with chilling clarity. Sarah, trust me on this. Conway is too soft-hearted to call out a sick child. Once the dog is gone and he's living alone, he'll realize how much easier his life could be. I'll give him a few weeks to adjust, then reach out to reconnect. The recording continued for several more minutes, documenting the entire conspiracy in the participants' own words. Emma had inadvertently captured evidence of not just the fake allergy scheme, but also discussions about financial manipulation plans to move into my apartment and Lisa's calculated strategy for winning me back. I looked at my 7-year-old niece who was watching the adults' faces with solemn brown eyes. Emma, this recording shows that you've been very smart and very observant. Thank you for sharing this with me. My father slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him completely. Conway, what do you want us to do? How do we make this right? You start by taking responsibility for your choices, Dad. You admit that you have a gambling problem and that you've been lying to everyone about it. You commit to getting help and rebuilding the trust you've broken. I turned to Sarah, and you acknowledge that you used your daughter to deceive me, that you conspired with my ex-girlfriend to manipulate my personal life, and that you prioritized your own convenience over honesty and family loyalty. Both of my parents nodded slowly, the weight of their actions finally settling on them fully. But most importantly, I continued, you both commit to making sure Emma understands that the adults in her life made serious mistakes and that she never has to lie or pretend to please grown-ups again. Emma had been listening to this conversation with the intense focus children bring to moments when they sense adult relationships shifting around them. Uncle Conway, does this mean I can play with Rusty again? For real this time. Not pretending. I smiled at my niece, feeling the first genuine warmth I'd experienced toward my family in weeks. Yes, Emma. You can play with Rusty anytime you want, and nobody will ever ask you to pretend about anything again. As my family left the apartment that afternoon, carrying copies of the documents that would govern our new relationship, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and relief. The people I'd loved and trusted had betrayed me in the most fundamental ways, but I'd managed to turn their betrayal into an opportunity for real change. Rusty stretched out on his favorite spot by the window, sunlight warming his golden coat. He'd weathered this entire storm with the patience and loyalty that had made him my most trusted companion for 11 years. Tomorrow we'd wake up in our own home, with our own mortgage, surrounded by our own furniture and our own sense of peace. The games were over. The truth had won. And most importantly, my family was finally going to learn what it meant to treat each other with respect. 1 month later, I sat across from my entire family in Dr. Rebecca Torres's family therapy office, a folder of documents and recordings spread across the coffee table between us. Emma was playing quietly in the corner with a set of building blocks, while the adults prepared for what Dr. Torres had described as our full disclosure session. My parents had been attending gambling addiction counseling and financial planning classes for 3 weeks. Sarah had started individual therapy to address what Dr. Torres termed manipulative relationship patterns, and had found a job at a local marketing firm. Most importantly, Emma had been working with a child psychologist to process the confusion and guilt she'd experienced from being used as a pawn in adult schemes. Conway, Dr. Torres said, "You've asked for this session to address the full scope of what happened with your family. Are you prepared to share everything you've discovered, Simbi?" I looked around the room at faces that had once represented safety and love in my life. My father, gaunt from stress and the reality of confronting his addiction. My mother, who'd been attending Al-Anon meetings and learning to recognize her role as an enabler. Sarah, whose defensive anger had gradually given way to genuine remorse as she understood the impact of her choices. "I think it's time everyone knew the complete truth," I said, reaching for the first document in my stack. Over the next hour, I systematically revealed everything I'd discovered. The gambling debts that stretched back over a year, the deliberate deception about Emma's allergies, Lisa's involvement and her calculated plan to manipulate our family relationships, the financial fraud my father had committed by using rent money for casino visits. But the most devastating revelation came when I played Emma's recordings for everyone to hear. Sarah's voice discussing how to coach Emma to fake symptoms, Lisa's voice outlining her strategy to eliminate my distractions so I'd be more available for reconciliation. My father's voice dismissing concerns about lying to me because Conway will never find out the truth. My mother broke down completely when she heard herself on the recording, agreeing to participate in what she called a temporary deception for the greater good of the family. The woman who'd raised me to value honesty above all else had rationalized lying to me for months. But the most painful discovery, I continued pulling out a final recording, was learning that this betrayal was planned long before any financial crisis. I pressed play on Emma's tablet, revealing a conversation from 4 months earlier that my niece had inadvertently recorded during a family dinner. Sarah's voice was clear. "Mom, I've been thinking about Conway's living situation. He's wasting so much money on rent when he could be helping family instead. And that dog is holding him back from finding a serious relationship." My father's response chilled everyone in the room. "Your brother has always been too soft for his own good. Sometimes family has to make hard decisions for people who can't see what's best for themselves." Lisa's voice joined the conversation, revealing she'd been a guest at this family dinner. I've been researching this, and there are ways to create situations where Conway would choose to rehome the dog voluntarily. If we can make it seem like keeping Rusty is hurting someone he loves like Emma, he'll give up the dog to protect her." The recording continued for several more minutes, detailing how they'd researched fake allergy symptoms, planned Emma's coaching sessions, and even discussed selling Rusty to a shelter once I'd surrendered him. When the recording ended, the silence in Dr. Torres's office was absolute. Emma had stopped playing with her blocks and was staring at the tablet with a confused expression. "Mommy," Emma said quietly, "you were planning the pretend game before I ever met Rusty." Sarah's face crumpled as she realized her daughter was finally understanding the full scope of the deception. "Emma, sweetheart, the adults made very bad choices. We hurt Uncle Conway and Rusty, and we made you part of something that was wrong." Dr. Torres leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Sarah, can you help Emma understand why the adults chose to involve her in this plan?" "Because we thought Conway would never question a sick child," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We used Emma's innocence and your love for her as weapons against you, Conway. There's no excuse for that." I looked at my 7-year-old niece, whose confusion was heartbreaking to witness. "Emma, I want you to understand something very important. None of this was your fault. The adults should never have asked you to pretend or lie. You were being a good daughter by doing what your mommy asked, but the adults were wrong to ask you to do those things." Emma nodded solemnly, then asked the question that broke everyone's heart. "Uncle Conway, do you still love me even though I helped trick you?" I immediately knelt down beside her, taking her small hands in mine. "Emma, I love you just as much as I always have. You're my niece, and nothing will ever change that. But from now on, if any adult asks you to pretend or lie about anything, you come talk to me." "Okay." Dr. Torres intervened to guide the conversation toward healing and accountability. Over the remaining 2 hours, each family member took responsibility for their specific role in the deception. My father acknowledged his gambling addiction and the lies he'd told to cover his financial irresponsibility. My mother admitted to enabling his behavior and participating in the manipulation, despite knowing it was wrong. Sarah confessed to using her daughter as a tool to get what she wanted and acknowledged the long-term damage such behavior could cause. But the most important conversation happened when Dr. Torres asked Emma to share her feelings about everything she'd learned. "I felt confused when the adults asked me to pretend to be sick," Emma said in her clear, honest voice. "I kept thinking about how Uncle Conway looked sad when I was coughing and sniffling. I didn't understand why we had to make him sad if we loved him." "And how do you feel now that you know the truth?" Dr. Torres asked. "I feel better because now I understand what happened, and I feel sad for Uncle Conway because the adults were mean to him and Rusty." Emma paused, thinking carefully. "But I also feel happy because Uncle Conway still loves me, and I don't have to pretend anymore." As we prepared to leave the therapy session, my father asked to speak with me privately. We walked to the parking lot while Emma played with Rusty on the grass nearby, her laughter providing a counterpoint to the serious conversation the adults needed to have. "Conway, I need you to know that I understand what we did was unforgivable," my father said, his voice heavy with regret. I've been going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings and I'm learning about the damage addiction causes to families. I destroyed our trust and I involved innocent people in covering up my mistakes. Dad, I appreciate that you're getting help, but understanding what you did wrong isn't enough. I need to know that you're committed to making different choices going forward. I am committed, son. I've turned over all financial control to your mother, and she's attending financial planning classes. We've sold everything of value we own to pay down our debts, and we're both in therapy to understand how we justified lying to you for so long. I watched Emma chase Rusty around the small patch of grass, her joy infectious and pure. Despite everything that had happened, my niece had emerged from this situation with her natural happiness intact, largely because the truth had finally been revealed, and the adults had stopped asking her to participate in deception. Dad, there's something else I need you to understand. This wasn't just about money or housing, or even about Rusty. You taught me growing up that family members support each other and tell each other the truth. Then you violated every principle you'd raised me to value. I know Conway, and I have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. We stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Emma and Rusty play together without the shadow of lies and manipulation that had colored their interactions for months. What happens now? My father asked. Now we rebuild our relationships based on honesty and respect. You and Mom continue your counseling and financial recovery. Sarah continues her therapy and maintains stable employment and housing. Emma continues learning that she never has to lie to please adults, and I continue protecting what I love while leaving the door open for real family relationships. And Lisa? I smiled grimly. Lisa discovered that her manipulation backfired completely. She tried to contact me after learning I'd purchased the apartment, but I've made it clear that any attempt to interfere in my life or my family's recovery will result in legal action. She's finally moved to Denver for real this time. As we drove home that evening, Rusty in the passenger seat and a sense of resolution in my heart, I reflected on the lessons this experience had taught me. My family had tried to use my love for them as a weapon against me, but their betrayal had ultimately strengthened my understanding of what real love looks like. Real love doesn't manipulate or deceive. It doesn't use children as pawns or exploit trust for personal gain. Real love supports the happiness and well-being of others, even when that means making personal sacrifices or difficult changes. My golden retriever had shown me more loyalty and honesty in 11 years than my family had demonstrated in the past year. But Emma's innocent questions and obvious relief at finally knowing the truth reminded me that love and trust could be rebuilt when people committed to doing the hard work of change. The reckoning was complete. The truth had been fully revealed. And most importantly, everyone involved finally understood the real consequences of their choices. 6 months later, I stood in my apartment, truly my apartment now, watching Emma help me arrange new furniture in what had become her weekend bedroom. The court-ordered family therapy had concluded successfully. My parents were current on their payments, as my tenants and Sarah had moved into her own apartment 3 blocks away, with a stable job and a commitment to honest communication. Emma spent every other weekend with me, not because of any custody arrangement, but because she genuinely wanted to spend time with her Uncle Conway and Rusty. The traumatic experience of being used as a pawn in adult schemes had been processed through months of child psychology sessions, and she'd emerged stronger and more confident in her ability to recognize and report inappropriate adult behavior. Uncle Conway, can we take Rusty to the park after we finish setting up my room? Emma asked, carefully arranging her stuffed animals on the new daybed. Absolutely, I replied, watching my golden retriever supervise the decorating process from his favorite sunny spot by the window. But first I want to talk to you about something important. Emma sat down on her bed, giving me her full attention with the seriousness children bring to moments they recognize as significant. Emma, do you remember when we talked about the difference between keeping secrets and keeping surprises? She nodded enthusiastically. Secrets make people feel bad or scared, but surprises make people happy. And if an adult asked me to keep a secret from you or Mommy or Grandma, I should tell someone right away. That's exactly right. And I want you to know that you never have to worry about disappointing adults by telling the truth. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but it's always better than lies. I understand, Uncle Conway. Like when I accidentally broke your coffee mug last weekend and you weren't mad because I told you right away instead of hiding it. I smiled, remembering how Emma had immediately confessed to knocking over my favorite mug while playing with Rusty. Her openness and immediate honesty had been such a contrast to the months of deception she'd been taught to practice by the other adults in her life. Exactly like that, sweetheart. Accidents happen, mistakes happen, but lying about them always makes everything worse. Over the past 6 months, my relationships with my family members had slowly rebuilt on entirely different foundations. My father had successfully completed gambling addiction treatment and had been attending weekly AA meetings. He'd found part-time work as a bookkeeper using his accounting background in a way that allowed my mother to monitor his finances closely. My mother had discovered through Al-Anon that her pattern of enabling destructive behavior extended far beyond my father's gambling. She'd started setting boundaries and requiring accountability in ways that had initially caused friction, but ultimately strengthened her marriage. Sarah's transformation had been the most dramatic. Individual therapy had helped her recognize that her tendency to manipulate situations to avoid direct conflict had damaged every important relationship in her life. She'd learned to communicate her needs honestly, ask for help directly, and accept responsibility for her choices without blaming external circumstances. The financial counseling had revealed that my parents' money problems were more extensive than even I had realized, but they were methodically paying down their debts while learning to live within their means. My role as their landlord had actually simplified our relationship by creating clear boundaries and expectations. Most importantly, everyone involved had learned that Emma's well-being required truthful, age-appropriate communication from all the adults in her life. That afternoon, as Emma and I walked Rusty through Lincoln Park, we encountered Dr. Torres, who was walking her own dog. Emma immediately ran over to greet both the therapist and her golden doodle. "Conway, you look well," Dr. Torres said as our dogs sniffed each other with the careful politeness of canines meeting on neutral territory. "How are things progressing with your family?" "Better than I expected, actually. The structure and accountability have helped everyone understand their roles and responsibilities, and Emma's doing wonderfully." Dr. Torres watched my niece playing fetch with both dogs, her laughter carrying across the park. Children are remarkably resilient when the adults in their lives commit to honest communication. Emma's recovery has been textbook. She learned quickly that she was safe to tell the truth and that the adults would handle problems appropriately. What surprised me most, I admitted, was learning how much my family's dysfunction was driven by avoidance of difficult conversations. Once everyone started addressing problems directly, instead of through manipulation and deception, most of the issues resolved themselves. That's very common in families that have lost trust. Often the elaborate schemes people create to avoid confrontation are far more damaging than the original problems would have been. As we prepared to part ways, Emma called out, "Dr. Torres, look how fast Rusty can run. Uncle Conway says he's the fastest golden retriever in Chicago." Dr. Torres laughed. "He certainly looks like a champion to me, Emma." That evening, as I prepared dinner while Emma worked on her homework at my kitchen table, and Rusty dozed nearby, my phone rang. It was Sarah calling for our weekly check-in conversation. "How did Emma's school presentation go today?" I asked, stirring the pasta sauce. "She got an A+ on her project about honesty and family relationships," Sarah said, pride evident in her voice. Her teacher said Emma's presentation was the most mature and thoughtful one in the class. "I'm proud of her. She's learned some difficult lessons, but she's handling them with incredible grace." "Conway, I need to tell you something." Sarah's voice grew more serious. "I got a call from Lisa today. She's moving back to Chicago for a new job, and she wanted to know if I thought you'd be willing to talk to her." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, but it quickly faded. The woman who had orchestrated the elaborate scheme to manipulate my family and destroy my relationship with my dog was no longer a threat to my peace of mind. "What did you tell her?" I told her that you'd made it very clear she should have no contact with you or anyone in our family. I also told her that if she had really cared about your happiness, she would never have tried to force you to choose between her and something you loved. Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot coming from you. Conway, I learned something important through all of this. Love isn't about controlling or changing people to fit your vision of what they should be. Real love means supporting someone's happiness even when it's different from what you want for them. After hanging up, I looked around my apartment, my home, and felt a deep sense of contentment. Emma was humming softly while she worked on her math problems. Rusty was snoring gently in his favorite spot. The late afternoon sunlight was streaming through windows that belonged to me in a space where my dog was welcome and my niece could visit whenever she wanted. The past year had taught me that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior or sacrificing your well-being to avoid conflict. Real family love means holding each other accountable, supporting each other's growth, and protecting the relationships and commitments that bring genuine happiness. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive choices, even when they're family. My decision to move out with Rusty hadn't destroyed my family relationships. It had forced everyone to confront the lies and manipulation that were actually destroying our bonds. Most importantly, I'd learned that the people and animals who love you unconditionally, like Rusty had for 11 years, deserve your protection and loyalty in return. Any person who would ask you to sacrifice something you love doesn't understand what love actually means. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, she asked me one final question. Uncle Conway, are you happy now? With Rusty in your apartment and everything. I'm very happy, Emma. Not because everything went the way I planned, but because everyone in our family learned how to tell the truth and treat each other with respect. And Rusty is happy too. I looked over at my golden retriever who had claimed his usual spot at the foot of Emma's bed for story time. His tail thumped once against the floor as if he understood the conversation and wanted to contribute his own confirmation. Rusty is very happy, and you know what makes him happiest, knowing that nobody will ever ask you to pretend to be sick around him again. Emma giggled softly, reaching down to pet Rusty's head. I like telling the truth better than pretending. It's much easier to remember. As I turned off the lights and left Emma to fall asleep with Rusty standing guard, I reflected on the complete journey my family had taken. We'd started with betrayal, manipulation, and lies that had nearly destroyed our relationships permanently. But we'd ended with honesty, accountability, and genuine love that was stronger, because it was based on truth rather than convenience. The experience had taught me that standing up for what you love isn't selfish, it's necessary. Protecting your happiness and the happiness of those who depend on you isn't cruel, it's responsible. And demanding honesty and respect from family members isn't harsh, it's the foundation of real love. I learned that family isn't about blind loyalty or shared blood, it's about mutual respect, honesty, and supporting each other's genuine happiness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even when they're family. True strength isn't keeping the peace at any cost. It's having the courage to demand the respect and honesty you deserve. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where family members asked you to choose between them and something or someone you loved? How did you handle it? What would you have done in my position? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else going through a similar situation. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family drama and standing up for what's right. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about the importance of honest communication in families, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve relationships built on truth, respect, and genuine love. Never let anyone convince you that protecting your happiness is selfish. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept anything less than honesty and respect. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the ones you love.